Lewis, for those of us on the outside, prison gives the impression that those inside are constantly under threat, physical or even sexual. How accurate is that?
It is accurate in the sense that if you don't defend yourself against it from the very beginning, you're in trouble. And you need to definitely make a certain, a definitive stand in every place you arrive. And that's whether you know people there or not. Because most of the prisons I entered, I knew people. But, unless I was locked up in a county jail, most of the federal prisons, I should say, because they were the guys I was with on the street, some of them who were in the prisons. But you still have 1,000 other inmates who have no idea who you are, and they're going to test you. So just to deal with the sexual part first, most of the sex in prison, believe it or not, is a form of rape / consensual rape. And I mean by that, it's not where you see in the movies where people hold a guy down and they rape him. Sure, that happens once in a blue moon. But most of the time, it's somebody punks up somebody else. They bully them. They make them afraid of them. And they demand sexual favors in return at some point or another. And that's usually, like, for example, when I was in the penitentiary, I learned that that could happen really quick. So when I went to a state jail after I finished my federal sentence, I was transferred over to the state. And there was a guy who came up to me at mail call, and he kind of like leaned his arm on me, and I told him to take it off. The next day he did it again. I told him one more time. The third time he did it, I wound up with everything I had and I slapped him in his face in front of everybody. I said, "Don't ever touch me. I let you know that already." Sure enough, within a couple of weeks, he had honed in on a guy about my size who, was living in his cell, and he must have, it starts with a touch. If you let that go, it turns out to a pat on the ass. If you let that go, and a lot of people don't know how to stop it right away. So for example, when I went on an appeal, I won my appeal and I went back down to a detention center where younger Italian-American kids from my sort of group were getting locked up at the time. And they asked me to come to the law library with them. They knew that I was sort of like an expert legal by then. They had heard and asked me to come to the law library with them to sort of go through their cases and stuff and tell them if they had any chance, what questions to ask their lawyers. So I went down and we were discussing stuff at a table, and somebody came up to me. And once again, he patted me on the leg, and I jumped up in the guy's face. And these younger guys said to me, "Lou, the guy's a nice guy. We know him. What are you doing?" And I said, "You don't understand. You haven't gone to a penitentiary yet. You stop it right away. You don't let anybody touch you. It's not like," and we're Italian. I'm Italian. I kissed my father till the day he died. I kiss my uncles and cousins when I see them, male and female. We're huggy, kissy people. We're warm people. The Spanish are like us too. So I'm not the kind of guy who's not a touchy guy. I'm a touchy guy on the outside. I have no problem hugging my friends, kissing my friends. I've done it all. But in there, it's not allowed because they take it for weakness and they push the envelope a little bit each day until you're in their cell and they punked you up. So that's the sexual part of it. You have to stop that right away. That's why I say most of the sex in prison is quote unquote rape consensual, because the guy sort of like let him get himself into that jam and it's impossible to get out of it. As far as the violence is concerned, violence is pervasive throughout the prison system. But I've been in medium, I've been in federal, state, and county jails, medium and high security. And each of those prisons has a different level of violence that you can expect. And when you're an expert like I was at it, I know exactly what I'm up against. I know that in a medium, a lot of threats are thrown around. People usually don't do anything because they see the door. The door is on the horizon and they want to get out that door. And they know that if they commit another crime inside, like stab somebody, they could get stuck there. So usually they stop short of doing things like that. There's still fights, there's still cuts. Somebody might cut somebody with a razor, but they're not cutting your jugular. They cut your cheek, they cut it's not sort of like they're not trying to deal a fatal blow. Whereas in the penitentiary, it's a whole different story. Guys are doing life. It doesn't take much for them to take a life. And they feel like the law has lost its power in the penitentiary. You have to be aware of that. once you give a man 6 or 8 life sentences, he can't even serve more. He can't serve more than one. So what can you do? Give him another 1 or 2 life sentences if he kills somebody? So what? Give me 25 more life sentences. I can only serve 1 life. The law has lost its power. And you have to be aware of that everybody around you has no hope. And there's no more dangerous man in the world than a hopeless man. That's the most dangerous people in the world. People go postal, feel like they have nothing left in society, and they went bananas, whether it's the McDonald's massacre or whatever. It's the same thing in prison. You got all those postal people locked up in one place. So you have to be aware of that at all times. So in the detention center, where you have a mix of medium, low, high security, I saw when I first got in where I was taught if somebody's handicapped, you help them. So one time I saw an argument over the phone, and it's this guy who had 1 leg. And he had like, the poor guy had, it wasn't like he had like this aesthetic leg that, you know, they gave like the runner who won the Olympics, the Blade Runner or whatever. This guy had a leg that looked like he bought it at Kmart. You know, it would look like he robbed it off a pirate. So I'm like, I feel bad for this kid. I'm like, you know, this kid's getting into a beef over the phone. If Peg Leg gets hit or something, I'm jumping in for him. I'm sticking up for this guy. So I get me, you know, clench my fists. I get up there, and I'm ready to jump in and fight for the guy with 1 leg. Well, the guy with 1 leg didn't need me. I learned this really quick. He slapped the other guy, and he walks away he hobbles away, you know, on his leg. And I'm looking at the other guy, and the other guy's bleeding like a pig. I go, what the? He had a razor between his fingers. He don't need help. He don't need my help. He won that fight, and that was it. And he went back to his bed, and he laid down like nothing happened. And, you know, eventually he got taken out of the place because somebody ratted him out that saw it. But he just went back, laid down, put his hands behind his head, and laid on his pillow like it never happened. So I learned quick, don't take anybody for granted. A friend of mine once said, you know, there was like an 80-something-year-old guy in there, and a friend of mine, he got smart with a friend of mine. My friend put him in his place. And I go, he's an old man. This is before I learned once again. And he goes, I don't care if he's Methuselah. You step out of line in here. He goes, you get what you got coming. He goes, this is a jungle. And it's true. The most decrepit, oldest lion in the jungle will still eat you for breakfast. It's the same thing in prison. And you have to always remember that. So then there's the next level. That's cuts on the face. I saw one time a guy called a guy a rat. He labeled the guy a rat. You're not supposed to do that unless you got evidence or unless you're willing to put the guy in his place and take him out. He labeled the guy a rat. He went to sleep. The next morning, the guy woke up and he got him early and he cut him. And the guy cut him. What he did was he welded melted 2 razor blades onto a toothbrush. So it's a double blade. And he cut him across his face. And you got this piece of like, you know, meat dangling in the middle. And he wrecked the guy. That's like the worst cut you could have because it's really hard to heal. And it's going to leave a nasty scar. He knew what he was doing. Well, it turns out that the guy was a rat. And, you know, just like in the political world, the things you tell people, you know, when you hit on something that's true, that's when they viciously attack you the most. It's the same thing in jail. The guy was a rat. You called him a rat, and he's got to defend himself so everybody doesn't think he's a rat. What is he going to do? He's going to cut you. You nailed the target. So he should have moved on him first. So I also learned too, don't label anybody, not unless you're willing to take the guy out. Don't put a rat label on nobody. If you know a guy's a rat and you want to take him out, go for it. But don't float that reputation on the guy and think that he's going to sleep on it. Because if he is a rat, that's more reason for him to get you, because he's got to prove to everybody that he's not. Then I went to the penitentiary. Penitentiary is a whole different game. Forget about double razor on a toothbrush. Forget about a razor between peg legs, fingers. All that's dead. Penitentiary is the big leagues. In the penitentiary, I walked in my first day in population. Jimmy Coonan, the Irish boss of the Westies, and a couple of Italian guys took me around the yard, and he introduced me to guys that we considered our allies, the head of the Latin Kings, the head of the Nietas, and they introduced me to all these guys. One of the guys they introduced me to wasn't really, the Aryan Brotherhood doesn't like anybody. They don't like Italians. They don't like Jews. They don't like anybody. They don't like blacks, of course. Aryan Brotherhood doesn't like anybody. But Aryan Brotherhood got along with us because Italians, and Jimmy Coonan was the Irish boss of the Westies. Once again, Italians and Irish, we get along with everybody, as do the Asians, believe it or not, the Chinese gangs. The Chinese gangs are very diplomatic. You always get along with the Chinese, never have a problem with them. He introduced me to the boss of the Aryan Brotherhood. Nice guy. I don't know him, you know, as far as the meeting was concerned, he was a gentleman. Like the boss of the Latin Kings was, like the boss of the Ninetas was. I couldn't distinguish him from any one of the others. I went about my way, lockdown called 8 o'clock. They clear the yard when it starts to get dark because you could go over a wall. The guys in the tower can't see you. They want to see you so they could shoot you when it gets dark. So they call lock in, everybody clears the yard. I no sooner got back to my tier block and the sirens going off. Hacks run by me with a machete like this, and it's dripping blood. And the guy's holding it with a pen under the leather strap. And they said they took out some NIGGERSs in A block. And I said, what's going on? Well, apparently that Aryan guy that I was introduced to went back to his block. They had already planned it, and he was as cool as a cucumber. He knew this was happening when he said hello to Jimmy and said hello to me. Went back to his cell block and stripped down to his underwear, passed out machetes to his Confederates, his colleagues, and they went on this murder spree. And they had a list of Black Muslims that they wanted to kill. And they hacked to death and killed 2 of them in their cell. One of them, I heard they hung up and gutted them. And actually, I saw pictures of the bodies after, because they try to shake you up after the institution does to see who knows what. I said, I just landed here. You could show me all the bodies you want. I got nothing to do with nothing. I said, I just landed here. I don't know what's going on. P.S. When they got caught, they had apparently 6 guys they wanted to kill on that list. So a friend of mine, I said, what's going on here? He goes, well, we're in the middle of a race war. We didn't get to tell you yet? No, I don't know that. Tell me what's happening. How it all started was he rewound the story for me because he had been there from the beginning. There were World Trade Center bombers in the prison, and they were kept in the hole in the isolation unit. And if guys went to the hole because the hole's overcrowded, sometimes they bumped up guys who weren't supposed to be with them. They got to double and sometimes triple the cells. So they stuck an Aryan Brotherhood guy in the cell with a World Trade Center bomber who was a devout Muslim. When the guy came out, he had been converted. He's banging his head on the ground 5 times a day towards Mecca. He's saying assalamu alaikum to everybody, and he's an Aryan brother. He's got the SS, the lightning bolts SS on his tattooed on him. So he's like totally in conflict, this guy. So the Aryan guys go up to him and they said, listen, buddy, you're embarrassing us. We understand you got a new religion or whatever. Get off the compound, check in, or we got to do something. It's an embarrassment to us. And he said to them, no, I love Muhammad. I love Allah. This is my new religion. You don't like it, too bad. So the Muslims then stuck up for him and they said, look, he's one of us now. And they said, look, he's not one of you. He's one of us, but he's a traitor, one of us. So he's got to die. And they went back and forth with this apparently until my friend Richie, good kid, Richie was sleeping in his cell one day and he gets up and he hears footsteps. And in the penitentiary, you learn to know people don't move quick unless they're making a move. So he said, Lou, as soon as I heard them footsteps coming down the hallway, I knew somebody was dying. I just hoped it wasn't me. He says he watched them go right across from his cell, 2 Aryan Brotherhoods guys. They went into the other Aryan cell and they hacked him to death with machetes. He said he was so bad, his neck was hanging on by a piece of thread, he said. That's how bad they cut him across the neck with these machetes. By the way, machetes, we call them bone crushers in Lewisburg. We used to have a metal shop in Lewisburg where guys used to make the bone crushers. The same guys who made the lockers and the beds would make these machetes. And you'd be walking the yard and you'd see a bag come flying out of a window and land in the yard. And then another guy go and take it and move it behind the bocce court. Another guy move it over here. And you're looking around, you're going, oh, the guy up in the towers, one guy's picking his nose, another guy's picking his ass. They apparently didn't see this, but I saw it. And that's how the machetes make their way to the prison. That's one of the ways. P.S. This guy gets hacked to death in his cell. He said, Lou, I'll never forget when they were taking him out. He said they had to hold his head onto his body to stop it from falling off. The Muslim, Black Muslim, and the Black Muslims, by the way, are not a religion, just to make this very clear. It's a gang inside prison. It's a prison gang, just like any other gang. It's not, I have respect for any religion, including the Muslim religion. I have no problem with any religion if it's a real religion. But if a religion, is a gang, it's a gang. Let's call it for what it is. It was a gang inside the prison. Maybe there were some guys who were devout, but they didn't run with the gang. So they vowed revenge on the Aryan brothers. And the Aryan brothers said, we killed one of our own. We had every right to kill one of our own. The black Muslims said, no, you killed one of ours, because the day he converted, he became one of ours. This is prison politics. So they said, now we got to kill one of yours. And they said, no, you got it wrong. This was one of ours. No, it's one of ours. We got to kill one of yours. They ended up going and they suckered this guy. He was a young kid from Tennessee or Kentucky, and he wasn't an Aryan, but he was a white kid, and he used to hang out with the blacks. He used to make hooch with them. If something came in off the visit, a little pot, a little heroin, he'd do it with them. And they trapped him off in a slop sink one day, and they stabbed him like 150 times. So they killed him, and they felt like, you know what? We got a white guy. So we got our revenge. The Aryan Brotherhood, even though he wasn't an Aryan, stepped up and said, hey, listen, there's 2 white guys dead now. So we're going to kill at least double or triple that black now, because we told you shouldn't do that. And they said, no, we had to get our revenge. And they're going back and forth with this. P.S. The day I landed in the institution, literally the day I was released into the general population, that was my first day on the compound. What they do first is they stick you in a hole and they try to see if there are any threats to your life, which never really works anyway, because they ask you stupid questions. You have any problem with the Colombo family? No. You have any problem with the Gambino? No, nobody in the Gambino family. You have any problem with the Lucchese family? No. You have any problem with the Bloods, the Crips? No, I get along with them. They're all my friends. Okay, we let you go. They just cursory questions and they let you out. You know how many times they let a guy out and he was killed 5 minutes later? He didn't even make it to his tier block. That's how fast they chopped him up on the Red Top. The Red Top is this place in front of the cafeteria that they call the Red Top because it's got red, like a stone surface, a red stone, cobblestone type surface, or a tile rather. But we call it the Red Top because it's been soaked with blood so many times. And guys come out, get killed right on the Red Top, and that's it. So P.S. I landed in the prison, and the Aryan Brotherhood had a hit list with 6 guys on it. They chopped up 2. They were on their way to the next one when one of the prison guards they got something to hit the deuces, we call it. It's a prison panic button on his belt. And we say they hit the deuces, which is the alarm. He hit the deuces and he says, lock it down. And he ran for his life. And what they do to contain, obviously, a problem like that in a prison or any fight is they slam bars closed. It's almost like when a sinking ship, when it's going down, they try to contain things by closing passageways to contain the problem. And that's what they do in prison. They slam all the bars closed and try to contain the problem. And at that point, the Aryan Brotherhood knew that they didn't have much time. And they said, stab every end that you can. And they started stabbing black guys just on sight. And they eventually got locked up. They eventually went to trial, got convicted. I don't know if they got the death sentence, but they didn't care. They did not care. One of the guys I heard that was on the hit team actually was close to the door. I said, why would this guy make a move like that when he had a chance of getting out, where most guys are doing life? Most guys are never getting out. This one particular guy had a shot of getting out. And they said, Lou, he got no life outside. This is his life in here. This is his whole world. What's he going to do? Go outside and pump gas until he kills the gas station owner because he's frustrated one day? These guys don't have a life. Kill somebody. You stay here. You stay with your friends. You stay with the environment you know. You stay in the subculture you're familiar with. And that's something else that should be explored by psychologists or penologists one day.